Hello. Hi, Dave, and welcome to everyone who is here with us on Facebook. This is a live broadcast of Farmers and Ranchers for the Green New Deal podcast. Farmers and Ranchers for the Green New Deal is a new project of Regeneration International. And it's been such a pleasure organizing this coalition. It's brought together a lot of amazing farmers, leaders in the organic and regenerative movement. And today we have Dave Chapman with us. He is a farmer at Longwind Farm. He's one of the founding members of Vermont Organic Farmers. And in recent years, he has launched first Keep Soil in Organic, and now it is the Real Organic Project. And Dave, I'll let you tell us more about that, but I just want to make an endorsement of this important cause. Because if you've committed to buying organic, that's fantastic. Buying organic, looking for the USDA organic seal, but we have to continue to fight to keep organic standards strong. And when we lose on important issues like whether or not we are requiring farmers to grow in soil as opposed to grow hydroponically with supposedly organic chemicals, we have to create other opportunities for farmers who are doing the right thing to connect with consumers who really want real organic. So Dave, let's start by, why don't you tell us the story of how you decided that we needed this Real Organic project? Why don't we start there today?
Sure. Thanks, Alexis. And it's a pleasure to meet you after all these years. I would just correct that I didn't start Keep the Soil Organic or the Real Organic Project. I was one of many farmers that was part of that founding of both of those efforts. The Real Organic Project came out of actually regulatory defeat, out of the ashes of a defeat in Jacksonville, Florida, at a big meeting of the National Organic Standards Board, and many farmers came from around the country to testify at that. And it was an effort to basically to get the National Organic Program to act on a 10-year-old recommendation. Well, at that point, it was a 7-year-old recommendation to prohibit hydroponic production as organic. And we failed. And in the course of that, I came into that as a fairly naive farmer, politically naive in terms of the politics of organic. I had not been to a meeting in many years. I hadn't even been to a conference in many years. I just farmed like most farmers. And I raised 2 kids and I worked a lot and I love my work. I'm not complaining. And I was very, very distant from all of these conversations about does the USDA call organic. And somewhere in there, I discovered that they were certifying a lot of hydroponic vegetables, a lot of hydroponic tomatoes is what I discovered because I grow tomatoes. And I was like, I thought we've resolved this back in 2010, because I knew there had been an effort to pass a recommendation saying that shouldn't happen, and it passed overwhelmingly. So we don't need to get into all like the NOSB and the NOP and the AMS. There's so much complexity, nightmarish complexity to how rules get changed in Washington. But I thought we'd won, and it turned out we'd lost. And so we tried again, and we had a big effort, and we got petitions. And once again, we thought we had a pretty good chance of winning, and once again, we lost. And in the process of that, I live in Vermont, and I get certified by something called the Vermont Organic Farmers, which I was a founder of so long ago. And it's all pretty good. The process is pretty rigorous in Vermont. And I thought, I think I was wrong about the USDA taking over organic certification. It's working very well. I believe it has legitimacy. And as I stepped into the national discussion, I discovered it wasn't working so well. and I learned about the large dairy CAFOs that were being certified. Probably the people listening to this know, but a CAFO is a concentrated animal feeding operation. It's where they put many cows or chickens or pigs into a small confined area and bring the feed from someplace else. And it's very efficient from an economic point of view, but it's it's bad in every other way. It's bad for the people who work there. It's terrible for the animals. It's terrible for the land, and it's terrible for the people who eat the stuff that comes out of there. And it's terrible for the climate. It's one of the major problems for climate crisis is confinement livestock operations. And what I discovered is that this is happening in organic as well as in conventional. And I just had no idea. So, like most people, as most people now have no idea that most of the tomatoes that are being sold as organic in America are from hydroponic facilities. And now a large percentage of the blueberries, I don't know what percentage, but a large, I mean, probably thousands of acres, certainly more than 1,000 acres of blueberries are being grown hydroponically now that are certified as organic. So all these things were much worse than I realized. And that's what got me involved. And that's how the Real Organic Project got started.
Well, let's connect this to Farmers and Ranchers for the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is the first piece of climate legislation that recognizes that agriculture has the potential to be an important solution to climate change. And the Green New Deal lays it out. We can work collaboratively with farmers and ranchers to remove greenhouse gas emissions and pollution from the agricultural sector as much as is technologically feasible. And we can do this by working with family farmers, by using sustainable agriculture practices that increase soil health, and by recognizing a human right to healthy food. That's essentially, a paraphrase of the language of the Green New Deal. So obviously we want to promote organic as one of these soil health promoting practices. And if we could, we would want to promote USDA organic as a practice that can promote soil health. And certainly compared to conventional or basically nearly any other type of certification, USDA organic is the gold standard. But take us into this problem of growing without soil, and why is it important to grow with soil? And what are the incentives to not do that? Why would anyone not grow with soil? And what are the pros and cons to someone who is uninitiated in this issue?
Sure. God, you just touched on everything. So, hydros and CAFOs are essentially the same thing. A hydroponic facility is essentially a CAFO for vegetables and fruits, and a CAFO is essentially a hydroponic facility for animals. And they both, the reason that they exist is it's very profitable economically. The owner can make a lot of money by reducing the variability of as many things as possible. And one of the things that has the greatest variation in our world is soil. This incredibly, in an organic system, you want a teeming universe, an ecosystem with so much different life forms in it, and that creates a balance and creates an incredible stability. But that's the art of real organic farming, is to manage that soil, to manage the life, to become a steward of that life. And it's in direct opposition to what has come to be called, and unfortunately is, conventional now. So the conventional farming is much more focused on chemistry than biology, and they figure out what chemical compounds you can feed plants to make them grow quickly. And I describe this, I think of this as sort of like the McDonald's model. So if you just go to McDonald's and eat Big Macs, you will get really big really fast, right? You will put on weight quickly. And I don't, and when we look at it in a human model, we don't confuse that with health. But when we look at it with an animal, it often is confused with health. It's like good, and this is the economic equation for a farmer. How quickly and how inexpensively are my animals putting on weight and or producing milk, more gallons of milk? So in a CAFO dairy, they're gonna milk them 3 times a day, and they're gonna milk at a high level, but the animals will burn out after 2 or 3 years. They take them out and kill them and bring in young ones. In a good organic dairy, they're going to go many, many years. That same cow is going to have a good life. So, that's kind of the difference of the conventional is very simple. How do we make a simple? Again, like McDonald's. McDonald's doesn't say, can we hire good cooks for each McDonald's? They say, can we create a system where we can hire any kid and put them in, and we'll say 13 seconds, and then it gets flipped, and it comes out the same every time. And then we add the flavor in some facility someplace else, a flavor industry facility, and we figure out how to make it that people want to eat it. The Dorito Effect by Mark Schatzker is an excellent book about that, and about why we are so confused and why we face so much obesity in our society, because the thing that we use to decide what we need to eat is our flavor, our taste buds, and we're totally being tricked by all these flavors that are being added to everything, right, including a McDonald's burger. So anyway, I'm sorry, this is way far afield. Like I said, that was a huge question.
Well, to respond to what you've been saying about the incentives that producers have to go this route, they can make it real simple. They can produce a product that appears to be healthy and nutritious, and perhaps tastes. I would guess a soil grown tomato is going to taste a lot better than a hydroponically grown tomato. Is there? Can you actually tell the difference?
I would bet the farm on that, literally. So yes, I can tell the difference, and so can you.
Yeah.
I don't have any doubt about that. That one of our tomatoes tastes much better than the hydroponic alternative in the stores. Mm-hmm. Even the stores don't have any doubt about that.
Yeah.
As one major chain said, Dave, we get it. Your tomatoes taste better. We understand that, right? What we're talking about now is price. So that's a different conversation. But no, they taste better, and that taste is a reflection of actual differences in nutrition.
Is it? That's interesting. Tell me more about that.
So one of my favorite teachers is a man named Walter Jenna, and he's an Australian soil microbiologist, and he talks about why it is. He makes a lot of connection between what I would call real organic and climate, and he gives a brilliant 3-day talk about it. But he'll talk about also why it's so important for nutrition. So plants and soil co-evolved over 350 million years, and you can't separate them, really. You can't have a healthy soil without plants, and you can't have healthy plants without a healthy soil. And this coevolution is complex. Plants have many substances in them. A friend of mine said, yeah, we did a test, and we found that the hydroponic tomatoes and the conventional tomato, the organic tomatoes, had the same nutrients. And I said, oh, did you test all 5,000 or 40,000? He said, no. And this is the question: is which nutrients are you testing for? There are 40,000 secondary plant metabolites that will be in a tomato, right? That will be in a cucumber, and some of them will affect flavor, and some won't. And some of them are important, and some of them we have no idea what they do. They might be important. Ergothioneine is one. It's an enzyme. I just give it as an example because I can pronounce it. So ergothioneine is one. And we know that it's a fairly potent anti-carcinogen, right? And so you want some ergothioneine in your food. Well, 20 years ago, I don't think anybody could pronounce it, and nobody knew what it did. Now they know that it's an anti-carcinogen, and they know that the health of the soil, the life in the soil, will affect the levels of ergothioneine, and it's a soil living fungus. And what do you get in hydroponic? What's the level of ergothioneine in that tomato? Well, who knows? And who knows what the relationship is between that and calcium and a million other things that I can't pronounce. So it's complicated, and we start to play with it at our peril. I think that the beauty of nutrition as coming from a healthy soil is that we are part of that coevolution. We co-evolved not for 350 million years. We've only been around for, I don't know, our most distant ancestors, I think about 9 million years. But we've grown to eat that food that grew out of that system. And the idea that McDonald's can outsmart Mother Nature, I don't think so. And of course, the problem that we're dealing with is that if they can't outsmart Mother Nature, maybe they can outsmart the USDA. And so we're trying to maintain the integrity of organic as a movement, because it's very important.
Well, I think that the points you're making right now are key, and we've gotten a response on Facebook about this. Sherry says, I would love to be connected to anyone who is scientifically correlating taste and nutrition. And Sherry, you can tell us more about what you do, but she says it's my entire messaging. So perhaps she's encouraging people to eat healthy, eat local, eat organic, eat soil raised organic. So you mentioned Walter Yenny. Who
Yes.
else are you working with on this issue? What other organizations, in addition to Real Organic Project?
Well, we work with the Organic Consumers Association. There are lots of friends out there, but I can tell you a few places to look for this. David Montgomery and Ann Clay are a couple, and they've written a book together called The Hidden Half of Nature. And then David on his own wrote 2 other books about regenerative agriculture, about soil and earth. And they're working right now on a book about soil and nutrition and health. And they're excellent researchers and excellent writers. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's going to be great. Another good organization is the Bionutrient Association. They do good work on this. There's some great people like Chris Nichols, who's a soil scientist. She was a soil scientist for Rodale for a while. Now she's working independently. I don't think she's written a book, but she does great work with farmers. So I don't know. I could go on. If you want a really good introduction, Mark Schatzker's book, The Dorito Effect, is excellent. It's a page turner. There was nothing in there that I didn't learn from. So it goes into this very deeply.
So it's not our imagination that the tomatoes from Longwind Farm outcompete the tomatoes that are grown hydroponically, perhaps in other countries or in California. But I do want to let you point out that you don't have to do what you're doing on a small scale. Longwind Farm is not a small farm. It's a large tomato. I mean, I guess small is relative, right? But it seems to me that you all do a pretty good business, and you've got tomatoes that you're distributing regionally. I guess
Yes.
hydroponic shops, they distribute globally, perhaps, but we don't necessarily aspire for a global food system. But you're able to supply tomatoes that you grow in Vermont to the Boston market, for instance. Tell us a little bit about how this regenerative organic soil-based system can be scaled up significantly to be obviously a way that we can do this, and to do it not quite year round in Vermont, but you're growing tomatoes, I think from March to November?
We're growing tomatoes year round.
Year round. Oh, okay.
Let me just say that always best is to grow your own, right? That's always best. If everybody had their victory garden, and I think in World War II we grew something like half of the vegetables and fruits in America in our victory gardens. It's not crazy talk. It can be done, and so that's ideal. And second best is the local small farmer that you know and love, and with a CSA or a farm stand. And we were a farm stand for years. That was back before anybody had invented CSAs. But so I think that these are the most important models. I became a specialist, and I did it for my sanity because when I got my first kid, I just couldn't figure out how to do it because the life of a farmer, such as I was pretty. Uh, I worked all the time. I worked all the time, and so do all the other farmers that I knew. And I just couldn't figure out. I wanted to be really involved with raising this kid, and I just couldn't figure out how. So I became more specialized, and we became focused on what was our most popular crop, which was greenhouse tomatoes. We were a very mixed vegetable flower operation with a roadside stand, and we became wholesalers. And I just did that so that I could have a life and make a living and do all that. So there's nothing. I want to promote the model of smaller regional farmers. I don't care if somebody's big if they do it right. The problem is that as people get big, they often stop doing it right. There are some big farms that I think do an excellent job. And so I won't just say big bad, but I will say that small is better. How's that? So when I say that we're not a very big farm, we're 2.5 acres, right? But we're very intensive.
Right.
So on that 2.5 acres, we'll have 30 people working. It's like a beehive.
Wow.
And we're just taking care of these plants and really tending them
Wow.
and really tending the soil. You know,
Gosh,
so
I've never been to your farm. And so
yes.
when I heard that you distribute regionally all the way to Boston, you're that's just amazing how productive 2.5 acres of soil can be.
Yes.
That's just mind blowing.
Yeah. So one of the ways that the hydroponic industry misleads people is that they say hydroponic is so much more productive. We grow 10 times what a field grower grows, or 20 or 50, whatever number they come up with. And what they're really saying is greenhouse growing is more productive, and it doesn't have to be done hydroponically. Hydroponic is easy, and I don't mean it's easy, it's much easier. I have good friends who are conventional hydroponic growers, and they're nice people, and they're honest, and they are honorable. They believe in what they do. I think the way I do it's better. That's why I do it that way. I could be a hydroponic grower too. It's not rocket science. It is a skill, and growing in the soil also isn't rocket science. As one soil scientist said, it's a lot more complicated. So growing in the soil is complicated. It is, and but it's so interesting, and it's so right. It's we are evolved to actually thrive on the smells of good soil, of good earth. And that is calming of our nervous system and makes us healthier. So it's really built in, and I can promise you, if you walk into a hydroponic greenhouse, it's weird. The whole ground's covered with white plastic, and the plants are hanging in the air. It's all strange. It's all strange. It is like science fiction.
Yeah, it probably doesn't smell right.
It doesn't quite smell right, and
Yeah.
certain parts of it really don't smell right. But
Huh.
I'm not here to criticize those people,
Mhm.
right? It's just, let's be honest so that
Mhm.
people can make it an honest choice. And I'm happy to say I think that the way we do it is better. And it's fine with me if they say, no, the way we do it is better. And then we let eaters make a decision, make a choice. And as long as we're being honest, and the picture of their stuff shows the white plastic and the plants hanging in the air, and mine shows the soil. It's just like with the CAFOs. If you
Mhm.
make a milk carton that has a picture of a cow on pasture, then by God, the cow who made that milk should have been on pasture. And if instead, if they're in a CAFO, then you should show a picture of a cow standing on concrete, looking really
Mhm.
depressed. And they never do that. Nobody ever makes an honest picture of a CAFO or of a chicken house with a million chickens in a building, right? So if we have honesty, actually that will solve the problem right there, because
Mhm.
all of a sudden people will abandon the CAFOs and go to the pasture raised meat, milk, and eggs, and they will abandon the hydroponic and go to the soil raised vegetables and fruits. So that's all we need. We just need a little transparency and honesty here.
Makes sense to me. So, how does a consumer identify a real organic project verified or certified item in the grocery store? And Longwind Farm, you're selling regionally. Can you tell us how to identify your tomatoes, where you can find them, but more broadly, for the whole real organic project and all the
Yeah,
farmers that are involved?
sure. So for Longwind Farm, you just look for the name Longwind Farm. It'll be on the little sticker on the tomato or on the pint of little guys. Um, for Real Organic Project, I'm really pleased that we have finally finished trademarking our logo, and it will be coming out. We did a little test run last month. It will be officially released in about 6 weeks, I think, and we'll send out a letter to the world announcing it and showing it. So, and we've got right now, I think we got about 560 farms certified across the country with the Real Organic Project, and that will continue to grow steadily. It's really limited by basically our ability to handle it. So, we're always out fundraising, so please donate your money to help us do it. This is certification with the Real Organic Project is free, as it should be. As it should be. I think it's a better model. Certification, organic certification in Denmark is free for all the organic farms in Denmark. No farmer pays a penny to be certified, and the government supports that. And yeah, maybe I'll mention this now. So I think that I was at a conversation um, in Abby Rockefeller's house, and Ronnie Cummins was there and speaking, and Shelley Pingree, Congresswoman Shelley Pingree from Maine, and Jim McGovern, Congressman Jim McGovern, and we were talking about the Green New Deal, and I was, honored to be invited to join that august group, and I said, everything we're saying is great, but you all, Shelley and Jim, cannot do this without us. That there is no Green Deal without a massive popular movement behind it. And but I think that it's also important to understand that when we're talking about things like climate change and maybe integrity of labeling, ultimately we have to bring the government along. And I honestly, after Jacksonville and after I was so discouraged by the USDA and by their failures, and Alexis, I know that you have been there. And it's discouraging. It hurts your spirit, and you go, no matter what we do, whether we sue them or we petition them or we go through all these processes, in the end, the rug is always pulled out. But and I no longer put all my eggs in that basket, so to speak. That's why we started the Real Organic Project. But I will say, you know, we must in the end bring government along with us. We can't solve the climate crisis without government. And the government will not move without us, without a food movement. So we've got to build the movement first, but the movement ultimately can't be to destroy government or to destroy the USDA. It's got to be to save the USDA, as unlikely as that sounds. And it's got to be to empower people like Congresswoman Pingree and Congressman McGovern, to become leaders. I would like to see Shelley Pingree as the Secretary of Agriculture. And I was kind of hoping that with Bernie, we might have gotten that. All right, well, we're not going to get Bernie this time. So, we hope that we will get somebody who will pick a good Secretary of Agriculture, because until we do, we're going to be fighting this impossible battle. But every time that we have a discussion like this in public and more people listen, we're building that movement. Michael Pollan beautifully said, and I actually think he was quoting Obama. He said, until you can light up the switchboards, you don't have a food movement. So, we have to make it that when Pat Roberts says, CAFO should be certified organic, he's a senator from Kansas, and this is a bipartisan issue. Debbie Stabenow said the same thing. She's a Democrat from Michigan. That until, I'm sorry, Pat is from Kansas. Did I say? Anyway, until we can light up their switchboards when they say something like that and have 1 million people call them, we're not going to succeed. When we can do that, yes, we can succeed. In Denmark, they've committed $150 million to taking the country as far to organic as they can over a 5-year period. That is, I think, the equivalent in the U.S. economy of like $19 billion. That's some real money, right? And they're doing that not just because they think that the food is safer or better for nutrition, but because they think that the impact of organic agriculture on the country, on the climate, on people's livelihood, on the air quality, on the water quality, on everything that Green New Deal wants. Denmark has said, yes, that means we need to go organic, real organic, not fake organic, not foganic. We need real organic.
Well, here's an opportunity, Dave, to let everyone who's listening know what you'd like them to talk to their congressperson about. I've been pointing out to folks that because of social distancing and COVID-19, they can't have as many in-person fundraisers. They can't have as many lobbyists, having personal conversations with congresspeople. And so maybe we have more of a level playing field in this scenario where you can still call and you can still email, and we basically all have to use those forms of communication. So let's take advantage of that and get on the phone with our congressional office, have a conversation, and what should people be asking for when they talk to their members of Congress about organic?
The most general level, they want integrity and transparency. And that might sound too general, but I was listening to a House subcommittee hearing where they were grilling Undersecretary Greg Eibach about the organic program. And over, the representatives were demanding greater integrity and greater transparency. And, I think that every time that a congressperson asks somebody like Eibach or Sonny Perdue, we're concerned about the certification of hydroponics as organic. We're concerned about the certification of a CAFO as organic. It changes the world. And when I was first involved in this conversation about hydroponics being certified as organic, in the beginning, it really was just a couple voices from Vermont. And that's how it was dismissed by the head of the National Organic Program. That is just a couple of malcontents from Vermont. Well, it isn't now. It's an international issue, and it's a powerful national issue. It's being talked about all over the country, and as it should be. We keep having the meaning of organic stolen from us. And this is not, I'm not saying this as a pissed off peasant whose livelihood is being taken away. It's true. I know many farmers whose livelihood is being taken away. And it's not right. They did everything right according to the rules. And organic was the safe haven for people who were still pasturing animals and for people who are still working on the health of soil and cover cropping and rotating and all the things that organic means. And you know, that's in danger of being lost, and that impacts all of us. And every time that the organic becomes a little less trustworthy, it impacts the whole organic movement. And let me say, I still always buy certified organic when I go to the store, unless I know that it's a company that I shouldn't trust. If I don't know, though, that's what I rely on. And then within that, I'm looking for Real Organic Project. And if I can't find that, I'm looking for farms that I know and trust.
So I'm curious, and one of our listeners, Sherry, was curious about this. How is it that hydroponics even works for organic? What sort of nutrients? Like, I don't really get it. Like, how is this certified as organic? Are they actually able to find organic inputs for a soilless system?
Right.
And is this, if they're not, perhaps this will be how we win. We prove that this just isn't actually possible.
Well, there is a lawsuit about that, and I am actually one of the co-plaintiffs, much to my amazement. I never thought I would be involved in such a lawsuit, but I couldn't resist. But the lawsuit is about whether something that is not grown in the soil could be called organic. And based on the law, it could not. The law says organic must be about maintaining and improving the fertility of the soil. So, on the very first definition of organic, as it is understood by the pioneers and the founders and the organic community and the farmers, organic is about shepherding the life in the soil. So as soon as you're saying, well, I have a pot of coconut husks and I'm pouring a liquid feed on it, could that be organic? And I would say no, even if that liquid feed is kosher. And then the same is true of a CAFO, of chickens who are fed 100% organic grain. So, okay, it's an organic input. Does that make it organic? I would say no, those chickens have to go outside every day. They have to be allowed to eat a little grass and eat some bugs and roll around and flap their wings. Then they're organic. Okay, so that's I think a really basic way of answering the question. But I think what she was perhaps asking is what liquid feed could be allowed that would be considered organic. So the way they get around this, I know so much about this, I wish I didn't, is they put things like pea meal or soybean meal through a process called hydrolysis. And they basically, it's an enzymatic digestion process. And what you end up with when you put it through, it's allowed to be called organic because it's not treated with a chemical, but it sure as hell isn't natural. So what you end up with is a powder or a liquid that is very hot. Like they can make, by hot, I mean it's got a lot of nitrogen. They can make a fertilizer that is like 1700, which means that if you make a little solution and you water it, you can actually burn the roots off the plant. That's why it's called hot. And that you can do that with any chemical nitrogen, and you can do it with this. So it behaves very much like regular conventional nitrogen fertilizer. It is plant available. It's pretty much ready to go. Yes, there will be some kind of small biological mediation, but it's very different from the process whereby my plants get nitrogen. If you do a soil test in my greenhouse and show it to a conventional grower, they'll say, well, you're really short of nitrogen. You've got a real problem here. If you test my plants, they'll go, oh, your nitrogen's perfect. And that's because my soil has so much biological activity in it that there's this slow moment by moment release of nitrogen. And it doesn't hang around as nitrogen, it gets taken up by the plant. And so it doesn't get leached out. It doesn't, you know, uh, it's possible in some places where it can actually outgas as ammonia or something. None of that happens. It just slowly breaks down and releases, and the plant takes it up. And there are all these wonderful biological mediators between the plant and the soil. If we think of when soil started, it was just mineral. It was just rock, and the rock gets crushed and it turns into sand and dust. And then the plant comes along, and now you have the possibility of life in that soil because the plant will feed the life. It will photosynthesize, which plants do, and they take the CO2 from the air and they create sugars out of it through the process of photosynthesis, and they use half to 2/3 of those photosynthates, those sugars, to build their body, to make carbohydrates, right? To make the body of the plant and the fruit that you eat, or maybe in the case of broccoli, you eat the plant. But they'll take about 1/3 of that and they ooze it out their roots, right? And they're feeding. They're involved in a transaction here. They're feeding all of the life that lives right around the roots, and there's just billions of bacteria and fungi living right in this root zone. And like in the case of the fungi, they actually go quite a ways out, and the fungi is mining the soil and giving the plant the nutrients it needs in exchange for the sugars that the fungi needs. It's this beautiful system. It's a beautiful system. So it's a system of life. It's a system. You can't have it without the plants. If you take the plants away, you end up with a desert, right? If you take the soil away, you end up with a hydroponic system. And the plant then is like, I guess, dropping 1/3 of its photosynthates into the water for no reason at all.
Wow. Well, I love what you're describing about the way you are helping your plants and the healthy soil create nitrogen from the air. And I think it speaks to this larger issue that the Green New Deal hopes to address, which is that we want to eliminate the greenhouse gas pollution that's coming from the agricultural sector. But it gets scary to some people who don't understand what you just described to us, because half of our greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture are coming from synthetic fertilizer. And if you told the average person, do you suppose we could continue to grow food to feed all of us without synthetic fertilizer, what would we do? But what you describe is a pretty amazing system that seems to work pretty good, and you're demonstrating it on a very small plot of land, and yet your very small plot of land is continuously productive because you're feeding this natural system. So I guess I have a question for you about what sort of inputs you use. You're using, well, I'll let you describe it.
Yeah. So of course, again, it just got really complicated again. So first of all, I want to say that my farm is not a model, and we're working on it. We're working on being better. So we have too big a carbon footprint, and I just want to acknowledge that, so that it isn't that I'm misleading people, because we heat our greenhouse, and we have a plan to we've already cut out about 1/3 of our carbon footprint, and we have a plan to cut out another 2/3 of what's left by moving to heat pumps. But I just want to say that, this is a process, and it's important that we acknowledge, as Yvon Chouinard said, Patagonia is not a sustainable company. He said there are no sustainable companies yet. We are a responsible company. We take quite seriously the challenges and our failures, and we do our best seriously to amend them. So I want to say that. So about what we do, we are there's a range in agriculture from very intensive to very extensive. And the most extensive would be uh, a pasture-based system, and maybe in a brittle climate, like a semi-arid region. And so there you might have, I don't know the numbers, but one animal grazing on a very large area in order to get its livelihood. And the more that you concentrate the production, the more intensive it becomes. And so obviously, because we're growing a lot of tomatoes in that small greenhouse, we're very intensive. So our inputs are intensive too. In case of our fertility, I mean, because we have a lot of people, so our human input is to start with is very high. To manage a large number of cattle on a big rangeland, very low input of human activity per acre, per whatever. So for our fertility, we bring in organic chicken manure and cattle manure from a very well-run small-scale dairy farm, not certified organic, but very pasture-based, and we bring in some hardwood bark, and we bring in some basalt dust from a quarry, and we bring in some silt soil, and we bring in some biochar type stuff, and we put all this together, and we make compost. Make quite a lot of compost out of it, and then we compost pretty heavily. So in an extensive agricultural operation, I'm sorry this is so technical, but we would grow all of our fertility, and this is a completely natural system, like the Great Plains, 9 feet of topsoil. They grew that topsoil. That was the buffalo, right? The buffalo in the grass, and the buffalo moved, and that's the Alan Savory story. Is how do you create regenerative organic agriculture in a livestock situation? Well, Savory ended up copying the buffalo model, and that's mob grazing, and you move them around. And the Elzinga family at Alder Spring Ranch out in Idaho, if you go to a Real Organic Project and look at the video of their farm, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And they herd the cattle on 40,000 acres of natural forest type land. And as a result of herding them, instead of eroding that land, they're building it up. These are beautiful systems that are working just as they should. So for us, we're bringing some of the fertility from other land and concentrating it in our little 2.5 acres. And what we've seen from the Great Plains is that properly done, those rangelands can actually build fertility. So they built 9 feet of topsoil. Well, we don't need to. So if we're bringing some of the fertility from other land, composting it and focusing it, we have a very intensive operation. And traditionally, market gardening, so gardening, would be an intensive operation. Although there's some spectacular pioneers now who are doing it with no-till and all cover cropping, or mostly cover cropping. And that's wonderful. We're not done learning how to do this yet. We're just getting started. One other thing, if I could answer for that question, when we say, well, would it be possible to feed ourselves without these kind of big farms and intensive agriculture? I would quote Vandana Shiva, which is, we already are. 70% of the world is fed by very, very small farms, very low input. And as she said, it's only 30% that is industrial agriculture, and it's unlikely that we could survive that moving to 35%. We're not sure we're going to be able to survive 30%, because so when people say, well, can you feed the world with this system? I say, can you feed the world with the system you're advocating for? It's not at all clear.
Yeah, especially now during the pandemic, we've seen how the large-scale consolidated industrial food system is so fragile, so dangerous for the people who are working in it. and so subject to breakdown at the least disruption.
Yes.
So we can become more resilient in so many ways. I'd love for you to oh, you have a
No,
thought to
no, no,
that?
no. I'm listening.
Um, you mentioned that you've got these fantastic videos on the Real Organic Project website,
Yeah.
and you probably share some of these on Facebook as well. So Real Organic Project is also on Facebook. I think we've probably created a link in the description here to that. Um, but yeah, this is an incredible resource, an incredible way that consumers can meet the farmers who are Real Organic Project certified. Can you tell us a little bit about this work that you're doing, creating these videos, and maybe highlight some of them that we can
Sure.
check out?
Sure. So aside from our certification program, which is entirely funded and supported by donations, and so far people have been generous enough that we've been able to do what we do. And we're led by a total volunteer group, mostly farmers, but we do have a staff. Um, uh, Aside from the certification program, we also put out these videos called Know Your Farmer videos. I don't know. I think we've got like 25 or 30 of them now. And as quickly as we can, I mean, we've got hundreds in the can. We just have to produce them. But they're really wonderful. And we have some just spectacular farms. Some of them are very famous, like Full Belly Farm and J.M. Fortier and Francis Tickey's farm, which is not big, but it's very famous, Radiance Dairy out in Iowa. And some are farms that most people have not heard of, but they're younger people. They're doing a great job. The Milk House in Maine is one of my very favorites. They're just this wonderful young couple. They have a beautiful small dairy farm, and they now direct market everything from the farm, make yogurt, sell milk and cheese. So yeah, go if you want to feel good, because sometimes talking to me, you can get depressed. So go and watch these Know Your Farmer videos, and there's some compilations too, one on the soil and one on livestock, and you can hear the farmers' voices, and they're great. The farmers are very eloquent. They're of course very knowledgeable about what they do. They by and large don't get heard much. Farmers are so busy farming, they're really not good at organizing. They're not good at at uh, lighting up the switchboard. It's why we get why we lose so often. Yeah,
Well, just one last thing that I think we should cover is a couple of other aspects of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is a massive investment in a transition, a just transition to the economy that we need to survive and recuperate from climate change. And part of that is the idea that we probably need some type of federal jobs program and to guarantee work for people as we have disruptions from climate change. And that these jobs should be really good jobs. They should have paid medical leave. Wouldn't it be nice if all workers today had paid sick leave? We would see a lot less of a spread of COVID-19. Just these, basic things. We need healthcare, perhaps not directly related to employment because that makes it more precarious. But when I thought about discussing the Green New Deal with farmers, I realized that even though obviously everyone should have a job like this, there's basically nobody working in the food system, especially farmers, who have these things that we consider basic to a good job. And because of your expertise working on the Real Organic Project, why don't you connect this point to the importance of strong organic standards? Why is it that strong organic standards produce better living for farmers? And how is it that having better regulations of agriculture could aid in producing better farm livelihoods for workers and for farmers?
sure. So when standards are compromised, um, and of course you don't need to be certified organic if you just sell to people you know, but we all go to the store to buy some of our food. And of course, some people have to buy almost all of their food in a store. And then we have to rely on labels and standards because we don't know our farmer. And so when those standards get compromised, just say, for example, if you say it's okay to grow hydroponically a blueberry, it's okay to put down a sheet of plastic and put the blueberry plant on it and put a drip stake in it, and all the nutrition is dripped into that shredded coconut husk, and that's how the plant lives. That is cheaper than actually growing the fertility in the ground and planting there. I don't think it's genuinely cheaper when we factor in things like healthcare, right? Social welfare, all the water quality, air quality, of course, climate, all of these things, all of a sudden, that thing that's protected, the CAFO hamburger. Yeah, I just saw a thing that the CAFO hamburger, without all the government protection, would cost $100. It's not a 99-cent hamburger, but we are paying for it in a million other ways. So that's the problem. Food has become very cheap. And when you say that's what we call an organic hamburger or an organic blueberry, you mandate that. Now, how's the person who's growing the one where it doesn't have all those unintended consequences, where the hamburger actually, if people eat it, or the blueberry, whatever, that the healthcare costs go down because the person is healthier, right? And the water quality, so the neighbors don't get sick. And the climate change is reversed. We think agriculture is the big player in climate change. We can't, and Paul Hawken agrees with that. I think Bill McKibben is agreeing with that now too. It's a big deal. So, and of course, it's the big conversation here, and it's one that we all need to be involved in, even if we're not farmers. So when we let the standard become eroded, we can't even tell how to support the kind of farming we want to support. If we can keep the standards strict, at least if you want to, you can go in the store and make a choice. You can say, and people are doing it now. They're going and say, I will pay more for this. But they're not supporting the farmer they want to. I think it's one of the great tragedies of our time is that I see hundreds of farmers going out of business, and I see millions of customers who want to buy the food those farmers are growing, and they can't. They can't connect to each other. That's what the Real Organic Project is trying to do, whether it's through the Real Organic Project or the Regenerative Organic Certification, or I don't know how else, but some other way. Savory Institute's coming up with a label, but we have to find a way to recognize each other and be able to buy the food that we want to eat for ourselves, but to support the system so it continues. And that's our koan, is how do we find these pieces which they're seeking for each other in the dark, and how do we find each other, and so that we can build the system that we all believe in.
Wonderful. Well, Dave, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. This is, for anyone who doesn't know this is our first time getting together. We've never met in person, so I'm really glad to have been able to share this conversation with all of you who are listening. And I hope you all will share this video and look for the podcast version of this conversation with the Farmers and Ranchers for the Green New Deal podcast, and go to Real Organic Project and acquaint yourself with the farmers at Real Organic Project. Look for their products, seek them out, support the organization, and Dave, just keep up doing what you're doing. It's so marvelous. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. You too, very much. Thank you.